The wonderful world of Zoom.
Here we go.
Hey everybody out there, this is CP the Vintage Retro Man, your neighborhood hope dealer, and I'm happy to be here with my friend and my homie, my coach. I call her Coach. Makita Makes Tunes. Really appreciate the opportunity, Makita.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to call you Chuck or Vintage Retroman. I don't know which name you want. But
Either one is
thank
fine.
you for being here. Actually, we can open a prayer too.
Amen.
So yeah,
Amen.
that was kind of quick. That was kind of quick.
No problem. I appreciate that. I always appreciate prayer. Yes.
So just tell me a little bit about like what was like that revelation that first came to your mind and how you came up like with that create and cultivate concept.
Sure. So it's kind of crazy, Makita, because maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, I did a men's group Bible study at my church at the time. It was called 33 Authentic Manhood, and it introduced this idea of create and cultivate from the perspective of manhood. But as I dug deeper into the study and as I did my own research, it really became evident to me that the idea of create and cultivate is something that we all share, male and female. When God created us, he created us in his image, in his likeness, both male and female. We are the only creation that, although he created the animals, male and female as well, he gave us dominion over the birds of the sky. He gave us dominion over the fish in the sea. And he gave us a unique ability as humans to not only be part of, I guess, animal instincts or kind of the status quo, but he gave us the ability to create, to think deeply, analytically, to learn, to grow, to process, and to create. And so, because God created us male and female in his image and in his likeness, he created us to create. And that's kind of the premise. That's where the idea came from.
Back to Adam and Eve, the book of Genesis. So taking the Adam and Eve story and kind of bringing it up to real life. So what are some of the weaknesses and the strengths that you have with your ability to kind of create, if that makes sense?
That makes complete sense.
Like talk about you as like a creative, like today and how that applies to you right now.
Sure thing. Absolutely. That's a great question. So for years, I struggled with this idea of, becoming what I wanted to become and what I truly believe God has called me to become, which is a blogger, Christian rapper, an artist, someone that's creative. I came up with a business background, spent several years in corporate America. And during that time, I kind of, honestly, Makita, especially in my 20s, I kind of feel like I lost my ability to dream for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I felt like God had been calling me to this for about 6 or 7 years, and I never really stepped out and did anything with it. And when I happened to lose a job, it actually took a big traumatic event like, the loss of employment.
Right.
To take me out of that comfort zone that I was in. And so when I lost that job, I said, I'm going to start a blog and I'm just going to start writing. I've always loved to write. And I started writing everything from love songs to poetry, everything in between. And the struggle that I had and the struggle that I still have sometimes, like most artists, I get writer's block. I have times where, my creativity, I struggle a little bit and
right.
I have to pray about it. I have to dig deep. I have to meditate. I have to do all those things that we all have to do, to kind of get our minds right. Well, I just know that a lot of people have the same struggle that I have, feelings of inadequacy, feelings like, well, I don't measure up in comparison to that person. Mm. Sometimes it's feelings like, man, I don't measure up feelings to my, like, according to myself and my beliefs, kind of like a self-limiting belief system.
Right.
And I think a lot of that stems from societal norms. Oh, well, you can't be in your 30s and be a Christian rapper. You can't be in your 40s and become an artist. You can't be in your 50s and start painting. You can't be in your 60s and decide to be an interior decorator. So society
Right.
has a way of placing these norms, and sometimes I think we get in our own way and we get trapped inside of our minds and our thinking with self-limiting beliefs, when in actuality that may be how we feel.
Mhm.
But God's truth, he created us for a specific purpose. He said we're fearfully and wonderfully made in the word. So we can kind of take that and run with it, because he created us, with all of our intricate details as male and female. We can take that same ability to create and
Right.
implement it in our own lives and create something great with it.
I say, like, the thing that I struggle with the most is that, like, I like how you're coming from the angle of that, like, you can't be 30s and the 40s and 50s and and doing this. But my issue is that I'm 25, but I struggle because I felt like I haven't done enough, or I'm not where I should be by now. And I would say, like what would you say to somebody, like, even believer or non-believer, that, like, how do you begin to wrap your mind around how God sees you? Because, like, one thing that I've learned, probably during the pandemic, and I would say for me it took like a loss of employment too. In 2019, like, now, like, the job, like, that I was at, it closed down because they didn't make enough sales. Like, that was it. And so quickly I had begun to realize that my security and my trust,
Yeah.
it wasn't in God, but it was in that job. It came down to, like, that not feeling like enough, that toppled my frustration in 2020. Because, like, here I was, like, unconsciously, like, with my security in that job, I guess, like, with essentially my worth in that job, and adding that not enough in that lack of security in God, it just, like, it
Wow.
it boils up into, like, this one big thing. Like, I think, so I would say that 2020 for me was more like a wilderness and like an Egypt season. And I had to begin to kind of center back to everything. Because, like, that's when I realized, like, it doesn't matter, like, the job, it doesn't matter the whatever. Like, the only thing, like, that's constant was God. So it's
Mm,
kind of like he was saying, like, you need
mm.
to refocus yourself back to me. Because
Wow.
job or not, like, all that's going to change is going to be up and down. So
Mm-hmm.
what's one of the ways of how do you wrap your mind around seeing yourself the way God sees you? Because, or seeing your worth the way God sees it, because it's already a hard concept to wrap our minds around how much he loves us. Like, a lot of us don't understand that right now we're more loved than we'll ever be. We look for it in other things, like we look for it in vices, we look for it in partners, in, like, performing for audiences, and, like, different stuff like that. So how do you go about, like, wrapping your mind around your worth and, like, God's love for you?
Well, first things first, let me say thank you so much for your transparency and for sharing your story with me and with our audience. I know that that had to be a difficult time for you,
Mhm.
especially, being in your mid 20s and
Sounds
figuring
pretty,
things
right?
out. Oh my goodness. Gotcha. Well, so what immediately comes to mind for me,
Mhm.
and what I would encourage you and any of our younger listeners, millennials and Generation Z, with, is a couple things. Number one, the knowledge that nothing takes God by surprise. He is omnipotent, he's omnipresent, he's omniscient. And so nothing takes him by surprise. And so when these things happen in our lives, immediately what generally happens is we feel a state of shock and we're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do at
Mhm.
this point? How am I going to pivot? How am I going to make moves?
Right.
When the word, does tell us to be still and know that he is God.
Mhm.
The word tells us to humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift us up. And so I think one nugget that I can say for those that are in the faith, for those that are Christian, and I'm going to address some encouragement for those that are not in the faith as well. That's just a universal principle in a minute. For those in the faith that do believe, I believe it's important to remember that God doesn't operate within the realm of space and time like we do.
Mhm.
For God, 1 year of unemployment is nothing to him. He already knows. He's
Right.
already there on the other side. He
Right.
knew that this was going to happen well before it happened. I want to say the word says something along the lines of 1 year is like 1,000 to him, and a
Oh yeah.
thousand is like
1,000 years.
one.
Okay. That's
He
good.
doesn't operate,
That's good.
within that realm of space and time. But of course, we're in this flesh, so we have to deal with these issues. So I think being realistic with yourself, being self-aware of yourself is very important, and realizing that despite our feelings when we go through situations, God's promises, for those in Christ and those in faith, God has promised us he will be there. He will work on our behalf. He will get us out of this.
Right.
A lot of times it's just holding on and doing what you can and taking baby steps. And that's kind of a segue into encouragement for everyone. I realize not everyone is a Christian. Not everyone believes the way that we do. And
Right.
there are certain universal principles, the principle of sowing and reaping. If you're sowing good seed, eventually you're going to reap something good. If you pace yourself and take baby steps, the human spirit is powerful. The human spirit can accomplish a lot. And when we're going through difficult times, believer or non-believer, there are certain principles that reign true. That principle of perseverance, the principle of leaning into others, getting encouragement from other positive people, other positive sources, making sure that you surround yourself with a network of good-hearted people that are kind and compassionate, that genuinely care. One big thing,
Yeah.
what you consume, the music that you listen to, the
Preach.
things that you watch, Christian, non-Christian. Hey, there are certain things that if you sit in front of the news and you watch the news all day long, I don't care what your walk is, what your faith is, you're probably going to be depressed at some point.
Right.
Social media, there are times when it's good to take a social media break. It's good to meditate. It's good to get out in nature and enjoy the beauty that's in nature. Look up at the sky, look up at the trees, stand in front of a lake and look at the ripples. And I'm telling you things, Makita, this is kind of my testimony, because when I lost my job, these were the things that I did.
Right.
There were times when I got so frustrated because I was like, I'm not where I want to be right now. And I wanted it right now. I want it now. I want it now. I want it now. And for me, God was saying, slow down, slow your roll, wait on me.
Right.
It's going to be all right.
Wow, that's really good.